for being here. My name is Sheriff Troy Nehls, and today we would like to talk a little bit about a coordinated effort, an operation that took place with agencies throughout the greater Houston area, specifically HPD, Pearland, and Sugar Land Police Department, as well as the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office. For the last several months, we've seen a spike, an increase in burglaries in Fort Bend County. And many of those burglaries taking place in apartment complexes throughout Fort Bend County. So we reached out to our neighbors, our law enforcement partners throughout the greater Houston area, and they saw some similar things taking place in their jurisdictions. Well, through a coordinated effort and very good police work, we were able to apprehend 6 individuals, all from Honduras, and I believe there are pictures are on the screen behind you. 5 of them are actually from Honduras, and the other one is from Cuba. They're all in jail today. 3 of them are currently in the Harris County Jail. 2 of them are being held by ICE, and 1 is in our facility here at the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office. They were pretty clever, targeting many of the Asian Indo-American communities, the apartment complexes, several of them in Fort Bend County. I know some in City of Houston and in Pearland and in Sugar Land, but specifically focusing on apartments. I asked some of the investigators, why apartments and why not beautiful homes in Telfair or the Woodlands? And their opinion is, well, many of these apartment complexes don't have individual alarm systems on these individual apartments. But the damage that has been done to the residents of the greater Houston area, the victims of the burglaries, we're attributing about 70 of our burglaries to these 6. I think Pearland said they could have upwards to 20. Sugar Land has some. Houston has almost up to 20. So we're talking these individuals committing more than 100 burglaries in the greater Houston area over the past several months. And the damage that was done, we have some families here with us this afternoon that were victims of some of these burglaries. They targeted really specific. They were specific. Gold, small jewelry items, and cash. That's what they wanted. They left the laptops and the TVs inside the apartment. They just wanted the small items that are easy to pawn, easy items to pawn. Gold, easy to melt down. And we have some of those victims here with us today to share some of their frustrations that they have. Because these items, whether it was just a watch, the watch may not have that significant value as far as dollars, but the sentimental value that it had, because it was handed down to them from the last few generations. That's what's hard as a sheriff, to tell them, are we going to be able to recover those items? We're doing the best we can. I've assured them we're going to try. We will spare no expense to help try to recover some of those items that they had stolen out of their house. But it's also frustrating as a sheriff that it seems like law enforcement, we're fighting 2 fronts, people. Pay attention, fighting 2 fronts. The front here locally at home, because it seems now in law enforcement, everything is dealt with. We have to deal with partisan politics. Partisan politics, not only at the local level, but at the federal level as well. Because when it comes to crime, and I've heard the Chief of Houston, Art Aceveda, I've heard Ed Gonzalez express his frustration and his concern when we arrest people for serious felonies and they're just released, the catch and release, these low bonds, can be very frustrating here at the local level. Not only does law enforcement have to deal with that, now we also have the issue at the federal level when it comes to our southern border. You're going to find that some of these individuals, the guy on top, the ringleader, has been deported more than 3 times. You've got to ask yourself that question. How do you get deported out of this country more than once? It is more difficult, in my humble opinion, it is more difficult to go through a Harris County toll road than it is to get through our southern border. And we have to do something about that. Because you think the victims behind us care about that partisanship? They want it to stop. We must do better. It's time for our local leaders, our elected leaders at the state and federal level, to do something about the problem that we're facing in the Harris County area. Fort Bend County, we've had enough. We've had enough. We're able to apprehend them, we're able to catch them, and here we are today having to deal with this. A couple years ago, you can see that we arrested some Colombian nationals. Arrested 17 of them, committed hundreds of burglaries, and now we have individuals from Honduras doing the same. I'm going to open it up to some questions specific as it relates to the ammo or information you want on the different burglaries that they committed in the areas throughout the greater Houston area. I will have our lead detective on that, Scott Heinemeyer, talk about that. But we have partners here from Pearland, Sugarland, and Houston Police Department here as well. So if you have questions related to that, please feel free. Now would be the time. And then we can open it up. You have questions to some of the families, some of the victims behind me, that they need to be heard. Their voices need to be heard because they're the true victims in all of this. We're opening it up.
Detective, hi, how are you?
Hello.
Can you just tell us how this happened exactly? Would they knock on the doors? Would they break in? With how and was this a sophisticated group, or was it a group of guys that knew each other and just kind of?
It's a fairly sophisticated group. What I'd like to start with is, just like the sheriff said, I mean, this is a multi-agency investigation. So just the sheriff's office alone, in other words, we had to depend and work with the Houston Police Department, Sugarland Police Department, Pearland Police Department, and I'm a sergeant here with the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office in Burglaries. So when they say lead, I want to point to a couple here of our detectives here in B&T, and of course it's invaluable experience from these other agencies that helped us bring this kind of case to a close. So over several months of investigation, this is, I'll give you kind of a synopsis of what we learned through some surveillance and case investigation. Typically they'd use one or more vehicles. They would have crooks in separate vehicles. They would work with each other in tandem. They would go into complexes. Some guys would get out on foot. They'd all be in contact by phone with each other. So in some surveillance video we've seen they had like earbuds in. And typically what we found is that they would like to find their mark. Basically they would find an individual leaving their apartment, making the assumption then that no one's home. One or more would go knock on the door, and if there's no answer, it's typical pry force. So what we started to see over a period of time is a lot of key factors that were similar or the same. In other words, time of day was a pretty important thing. These are typically between 9 a.m. and say 1-ish to 2 p.m. was about the time frame. Not all, but that was a very specific time frame. Also, we started to develop information that a lot of these victims had only been gone. In one particular case, only 20 minutes to take their child to school. So it certainly would lead you to believe that these individuals were watching people. So what we come to find out is they'd get in there just the manner I described. They'd watch someone leave, someone would go knock, force entry, and then of course steal items from these people. Sometimes very, I guess, valuable to them and sentimental, as you can all expect.
They work fast.
Very fast.
And you said, Sheriff said they really only went for specific items. Can you just elaborate on that? Because some of the bigger items just probably were too hard to carry, and they wanted to be fast.
Well, I think it's items that could easily be sold, whether legally or illegally. They targeted gold was one of the things that we noticed. That's part of the MO that we started to establish. In other words, they specifically, in my opinion, targeted certain ethnicities. And the reason why I say that is a vast majority of our complainants were Middle Eastern, Asian, Indian. So I believe that they thought or believed, and I think they were right, that those particular ethnicities, they would often keep, jewelry at home.
As officials frustrated, I'm sure Sheriff Nehls said that, to be able to watch these people and catch them and say, okay, we did this, and then to have one of the leader come in, he's been deported several times. Can you talk about how frustrating that is? I know Sheriff touched on it, but you guys see it all the time, I'm sure. So can you elaborate on that?
Of course, it's very frustrating. So it's frustrating to all members of law enforcement. I mean, our agency and all the agencies that have worked with us to bring this case, or these cases to, I guess, close. It's a bigger problem, obviously, but being able to get out of jail after you commit a serious felony for either a low bond, or when you have cases, like in this case, where you've developed information that you have individuals that have repeatedly entered the country illegally and then commit felonies. And I can say with certainty that going through some of the records of these individuals, they've committed felonies in the past, have been deported, and have returned. So we have people that have entering illegally and committing felonies.
Sergeant, how did y'all catch these guys? How'd y'all?
Sure.
You pulled security video at pawn shops? Did someone ID them? How'd you find out where they lived? How'd y'all get them?
What I'd like to say is just keep it as simple as, like, we conducted surveillance, in other words, and I say we, meaning as a collective group of investigating agencies, and it's pretty taxing. It's manpower intensive. Basically, you had to follow these criminals around. They'd use different vehicles. Different criminals would get into different vehicles, but ultimately what you would have to do is just basically follow them to these apartment complexes, and once they leave, you'd have to try to find that burglary. Because obviously, if you were burned, so to speak, in other words, if you let them see that you're following them, they wouldn't commit crime. So that's basically how we had to do it.
Do you believe there are more out there part of this group?
Yes, we do. So while conducting this investigation, in other words, you start to identify additional vehicles, additional players, and in some cases what we would do is have basically a suspect vehicle, or we'd find a vehicle operating with our known crook vehicles that would be new basically to our investigation. However, we would just surveil those if they were to stop at a convenience store, so to speak. In a couple of those cases, we'd go pull surveillance video. So now you had pictures, you have faces, but now we had to determine who those persons are.
Are these all the arrests made with this group? Are there more still at large with this group?
In other words, that's still under investigation.
Okay. And have you recovered any of the goods from the families that have been stolen?
In the most recent arrest in Houston, I believe they recovered some property following that burglary. We've made efforts, in other words, through interview with some of the criminals that decided to speak with us and provide a statement. However, I don't believe they're being honest about how they got rid of the property.
And some of that gold is they particularly like a 22 carat rating. Is that primarily what it is? You know, I see the lady nodding her head.
Yes, and in other words, part of the MO that we developed is there would be cases to where complainants would tell us that they had costume jewelry and their real jewelry together in, say, the same jewelry box. And these crooks were very adept to determining what was real and not, because they would leave the costume jewelry on the floor and take the gold with them.
That 22 carat is a premium grade of gold, right?
Yes, sir.
Detective, do you have the exact numbers on the robberies on Houston, Sugarland, and the areas?
We don't have the exact numbers. In other words, this case is still under investigation. In other words, I think as we go back and we start to look at cases that fit this MO, likely there's going to be numerous more that we could say that this group is likely responsible for. However, we have to deal with facts. So we're going to have to go back, in other words, try to look at surveillance video, things of that nature.
Detective, we have cleared 70 though, correct?
This is going to clear 70. So what I could say that within, and that's an estimate, however, if you go back through some of those cases, we're going to have just those certain things that are common. In other words, midday, pry force. The pry force is very specific. In other words, I want to say that Sugarland, Pearland, HPD, in our case, is all basically they were just using a large screwdriver. But that left a tool mark on the door that was pretty specific. So you had midday, sometimes only gone 20 minutes, pry force, targeted jewelry, and oftentimes when we go to recover video, at the time you didn't know what vehicle you're looking for, but as our investigation developed, then you knew which ones to start looking for.
Are you making a plea to the public to, anybody else who has experienced this, who, may have reported it, may not have reported it, to anything, to aid your investigation?
Sure. I mean, if anyone has seen anything, in other words, if you learned that your neighbor, say, was burglarized, and you thought you saw somebody, but you weren't sure if you should say anything, certainly come forward and provide that information. We'll follow that up.
You mentioned that they were organized. How did they know each other? Are they part of a gang from home, or were they related? Did they meet here? What's your...
So what they reported to us, so 2 of them are brothers, and those 2 brothers are cousins to one of the others. So what we've developed is kind of a pattern that kind of over time is that one crook vehicle would leave the apartment complex in Houston where that individual lived, and then he'd go to 1 or 2 more apartment complexes, and that was almost a pattern where we knew that they were going to probably go out and at least do surveillance or try to commit burglaries that day.
Was there any point where the burglars had interaction with the homes that they were trying to enter with people that lived there, and if so, what happened?
I don't specifically recall if we ever had any, I guess, occupied burglaries, basically. Now, I'm not sure about Sugarland or Pearland or HPD.
So you said that one of them is in custody of ICE, so how many are in custody of ICE?
Okay, what I could say is they're all in our custody now, so meaning 3 are in custody in Harris County Jail, arrested by Houston Police Department. We arrested 3 on July 2nd. However, ICE took custody of 2.
Sure.
However, we've sought the assistance through our district attorney's office, obtained felony warrants for their arrest for conspiracy to commit burglary of habitation and burglary of habitation. And those individuals are in one of our warrant cars right now as we speak, and they're on their way to the jail.
When you arrested them, were there any like cache of weapons or anything that you also recovered? Any ancillary devices such as weaponry or?
No weapons, as far as no weapons were found in any of the vehicles. They were
Is
unarmed.
there an estimated value of how much they took based on here in Fort Bend and just sort of an overall number?
We don't have a specific value, I guess, total, but what I could say is probably immeasurable to some of these complainants who I'm sure you're going to talk to them here in a minute of, things that were, heirlooms that were passed down by grandparents. So these individuals would come in minutes and take things that these people can never replace.
The 6 of them are undocumented?
That's correct.
We have we're going to end this now because one of our people behind us, victims, has an appointment. So if you have any questions for some of the victims here, now may be the time. If you want to have any questions for them?
Yes, if one of them could step up.
Sure. Please.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
Can you tell us your first name?
Nashida.
How do you-
Nashida.
how do you spell that?
N-A-S-H-I-D-A. Nashida.
And your last name?
Subi, S-U-B-H-I.
S-U-B-H. Can you talk about your experience and what you lost and how that makes you feel, knowing that you were targeted? And I'm sure it's just horrific, but can you explain to us?
It's traumatic to say the least. So I've never experienced something like this ever in my life, and I've traveled through a lot of dangerous places, and I thought that United States apartment complexes should be safer. They only targeted my jewelry, so they broke into them, assuming in the morning I was at work. So it's not so much the jewelry. I mean, the collective value of my jewelry and watch and everything should be around 20 grand. I didn't have much cash on me, but it's the memory. They have erased a part of my life that I'm never ever going to get back. It belonged to a certain part of my life that I'm struggling with. It has certain past that I'm struggling with, and it brought back all those memories. Home is somewhere where you feel safe. Now I go back to a place that I don't feel safe at night anymore. It's been 2 months and I can't sleep at night. I hear a noise and I feel somebody's coming in. And from what I heard, that I don't know if another person is going to come again or not. I don't know. It's been really traumatic. I'm seeing a therapist, and I don't think this can ever be undone. So it would be nice if I can get back something, because it has emotional attachment to it, apart from financial loss. But like I said, it's part of my life that I'll never get back.
Was it pieces that were given down
Yeah.
by your...
Yeah, it was wedding jewelry. It was jewelry that was from my grandparents. It was something that was so precious. It was a watch that has way too much emotional attachment that I can express in words, and I just cannot tell you how traumatic that feeling of loss, and also the feeling of you feel violated. I came home to a place that's completely vandalized. Every single item of my possession has been see-through, thrown into the floor. You feel totally violated. I cannot express in words how traumatic that feeling is.
You said you traveled. Where'd you travel from? Where are you from?
I'm from Canada, so I came here last year, but I was in Houston. I had another assignment in Houston back in 2003, so I am familiar with this place. And there was a reason I particularly chose apartment, because I thought apartments are safer, because I thought, and I'm on the second floor, so I'm thinking it's only one point of entry, there are neighbors, people can see. I really didn't realize it's so easy to break an apartment front door. So they entered through the front door, and so did my neighbor as well, and he actually got robbed last week, and mine was on the 9th of April.
Come on up, please.
Can you stand spell your name for us, please?
My name is Edward, last name Ompoy,
Can you spell your last name?
Ompoy.
And can you walk us through what happened, what time of the day it was, sort of?
I don't know what time of the day it was. I came home with the kids around 7 p.m. and I see the place is, everything scattered. My safe, I have a medium-sized safe, it was broken in. So I feel like the kids were, they were so scared, it was traumatic for them. And up to now, they can't sleep, It's like if there's somebody knocking on the door, they would like hide, go somewhere else.
What have you had to tell them about what happened and how they're feeling?
I told them, the authorities will catch them and we'll bring them to justice.
Sir, knowing that one of them was the ringleader, was deported several times, and they came back and they're doing this, does that have any, trigger any emotion from you or thoughts or?
Really, I'm frustrated, with what the border or the Homeland Security is doing with these cases, and right now I don't feel safe, living in my apartment, and until they put a solution on these problems, then that's the time I'm going to feel safer.
Are you from the United States?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I came from another state, and I thought Texas was a good state. It's more peaceful, but then I was wrong.
This is Nusrat Retiwala. I'm representing my friend who went through the case. I agree with these two, what they said, but I would like to put one word. We need to help our officers to overcome the situations what they are dealing with. And I think this is what we should all do. We know that we lost too much, which we will, I hope we get it, that's a dream. But if not, at least we should help them to save the others. We should request this and take our message to the federal. This is all I can say at this point. But we lost too much. We have no words to say. We lost everything. Everything. And they made a havoc of our house. That's all I can say.
Can you give us your name?
N as in Nancy, USRAT, RETIWALA, RETIWALA, Retiwala.
Have you made other members of your community, your culture group, aware of this what has happened to you, and to safeguard their possessions and maybe to be a little more diligent?
It would, but again, it's not helping. I mean, everybody is trying to safeguard themselves, but we're not seeing anything happening unless our officers get help of stopping these kind of people getting in back and forth.
This is you. I'll try to help answer that question. They're the victims in this. They're not responsible for this taking place. The individuals responsible for this are the individuals on the screen behind me. And members of Congress, I hope you're listening. If you're watching, listen to the victims here. Listen to their story. They don't really care about your bickering and arguing and the partisanship about whether we secure the southern border or not, whether we should just release and have catch and release policies in the greater Houston area of keeping people out of jail. But I hope you're listening, because now is the time to stop, come together, and find a solution. We have to find a solution to this problem. Put the R's away and put the D's away. Let's make this an American problem, a problem that we're facing in this country. How do law enforcement agencies who do our best to try to keep the citizens that live in our communities safe, when we have policies that just in and out the door, no problem, whether it's the local county jail or whether it's at our southern border? The politicians, the members of Congress, even our state officials, we need to wake up. And I hope you're listening. I hope you're listening to what these people have said behind me. And whether it's an apartment complex or homes, beautiful homes in Aliana, they're breaking into homes, and what we're finding out is they don't belong here, and they've been deported more than once, twice, 3 times. And we have to find an answer to this. Because if we don't, this is going to continue. And the last thing I want to do is have another press conference in 2 years talking about a group of people from whatever country. Look, 2 years ago it was Colombia. You see how we've seen an increase in the burglaries? Now this year, look, we've seen an increase in the burglaries because of Honduras. What's the next country going to be? We have to stop the silliness, folks.
Sheriff, what's going to stop these guys from coming back a 4th time?
Well, all I do know is this, is when you get deported and you can be back in this country within 3 weeks, do we not have a problem?
Can't you just lock them up?
Maybe the best solution is just to keep them here and don't release them to ICE.
Yeah, right.
That's not how the system works.
No.
You would expect when local law enforcement agencies, they complete their time, they finish their sentence, they're released to ICE, and then ICE sends them back to the country of origin. And they're just coming back. Why? Because they know they can. I'm telling you, it's more difficult to go through the Harris County toll road system than it is to go through our southern border.
Can you explain that chart a little better, sir?
Yes, these are burglaries in the first 6 months of each and every year, dating back from 2013. And what I noticed is we've seen a 65% reduction in residential burglaries in this county over the past 6 years, and we're very proud of it. We're good at catching burglars. And then what I noticed is this one year, from 2015 to 16, we saw more burglaries. Well, you know what it is? It was the Colombians. It was that group of 17. We did a big press conference here a few years back. We arrested 17 of them. They committed 120 in the greater Houston area. We tied them to 49 here. And the same thing is happening here now. This year, first 6 months, 350. Last year, 262. We're going to attribute that to the Hondurans.
And those Colombian nationals were also here.
Oh, several of them here, undocumented, deported several times. Whatever word you want to use. Yes. But it's got to stop, because it can be very frustrating.
And I have another question for
You have your press conference. Go ahead. Would you
the
take them?
victims. Can I just ask them why they decided to come here and share their story?
I think they're through.
Okay.
They don't want to answer any more questions. I just think I invited them. I invited them because when you're a detective or you're the initial patrol deputy and you respond to that call and you hear their story, this is what I'm missing. What are you missing, ma'am? Well, I'm missing that watch. Ma'am, what's the value of the watch? Well, I don't know, but let me tell you the story about the watch that I received from my mother's mother that's been passed down. Those are difficult. And then it's our job then to try to recover that watch. Sometimes we're successful, folks, and there's sometimes we're not. But that can be very difficult. And I wanted you to hear their story on how frustrating it is for them and how burglary is a very intrusive crime. I mean, children that were able to, I guess, visualize the house or the apartment that was just, everything was thrown about and scattered. It's just never the same. There's going to be that fear in their mind. So my point is this: when it comes to burglary, and you have an entire family, and they visualize this or see that, it's going to remain with that entire family for a very long time. I invited them here so they could share their story. Share their story. And I hope people are listening. I hope people are listening.
Is
Sheriff, one last thing. Can you give us about the locations? Do you know? Just
Numerous apartment complexes. I think we had at least 5 in Fort Bend County. I think we had at least 3 in HPD's jurisdiction, 1 in Pearland, 1 in Sugar Land. So you can say a 10 apartment complexes in the greater Houston area.
You're not going to give us the apartment
Nah,
complex?
what's the point?
There's a video put out by the Sugar Land Police in early June of a man. Is there any way you can tell us whether or not that had to do with this case?
Oh no, Sugar Land. You know, everything's sweeter in Sugar Land. I'm just kidding. Is there somebody here that can speak? Come on up here once, good detective.
It was a burglary at the Imperial Lofts, and Sugar Land Police put out a video on YouTube pretty widely. The man looks Hispanic. Is it the same?
As of this time, the folks that we have here do not match that description.
Okay. Thank you.
Sheriff, the Colombians haven't come back though, right, since 2017?
Au contraire.
They were back.
Oh.
Same ones that you arrested?
We arrested one of them. Guess what for? Just recently, in the last 30 days.
Burglary.
Burglary of habitation.
You're in Fort Bend County.
One of the same knuckleheads that we arrested back in 2015, 2016 timeframe. He come back and committed another burglary. Our jail population, I'm in my 7th year as county sheriff in Fort Bend County. Our jail population has been the lowest it's been since I've been sheriff. Inmate population, low. Crime, increasing. Now, why don't you tell me, why is it like that? If the inmate population is the lowest it's been, and I'm seeing an increase in crime, why? Can somebody answer that for me? What do you think? Come on, somebody from the media, please. Tell me, everybody can hear you. Tell me, what would you attribute that to?
Poor investigations. That's not it?
The population is the lowest it's been because we're releasing them.
Or maybe one guy is committing 10 crimes instead of just one.
Not so much.
Low bonds, just unbelievably low bonds. It's $100 bonds.
We're having we get frustrated because we have caught burglars here in the last month unrelated to this, and when you're getting bonds, and what's funny is they're out on bond in Harris County. One specific out on a bond out of Harris County for a felony and 2 misdemeanors. We get a phone call here. A neighbor calls up and says, "Hey, a couple knuckleheads breaking into my neighbor's house." Okay, so we were able to apprehend them a couple miles from the scene. We open up the trunk. We find property from a burglary that took place, I believe it was in Aliana, a few days prior. And one of the guys had a felony, was out on bond out of Harris County for a felony and 2 misdemeanors. You know what kind of bond they set for him here? $2,000. And he's out. 12-year-olds can find access to $200. $2,000 bond.
Who's setting these bonds?
And you want to ask, why are we having an issue in Houston? And I'm sad to say that it's starting to trickle into Fort Bend County. It's starting to trickle into Fort Bend County.
Who's setting these bonds?
Judges. Judges are setting the bond. Anyway, I appreciate your time and your attention. I appreciate accolades to the City of Houston Police Department and everything you're doing. To our friends, our partners down in Brazoria County, the Pearland Police, and Sugar Land. Without you all, without us working together, this wouldn't really be possible. But I tell you, collectively, I think we all feel the same thing. We're frustrated with the policies, not only at the local level, but at the federal level. And somebody better start waking up and addressing them and solving the problem. Because it just shouldn't be passed down to our victims. Why are these victims having to deal with this? The partisanship. And now we, in law enforcement, we have to deal with these policies. Well, we're kind of sick and tired of it. And we must do something. We must do better. We must do better.
Sure,
Thank
this
you.
affects the taxpayers too, right? Taxpayers are putting this bill, right, Nick, right?
Well, I'm sure this investigation, there was some
Right, yeah.
man hours that were used to do this, but,
Have you talked to Stevenson and the local Texas?
well, I'd like to focus on Washington first. They're the real problem. Anyway, thank you for your time.